Have you ever witnessed a moment when the truth tries to speak, but someone in power crushes it before it even has a chance? This is the story of a 9-year-old girl who watched her own truth get torn in front of an entire classroom, moments before Justice walked through the door wearing NASA space gear. The storm began without warning. Ava Thompson stood at the front of her third-grade class, holding her project on space careers, her voice steady, hopeful. But before she could finish her sentence, Ms. Jennifer Clark sliced through the air. "Ava Thompson, stop lying to the class." The words hit like a shockwave. The teacher marched forward, ripped the poster out of Ava's hands, and tore one of its edges in the process. 28 children froze, eyes darting between their classmate and their teacher. "Your father is not a NASA astronaut," Ms. Clark declared. "Kids like you always make up stories to get attention." Ava's cheeks burned, but she stayed calm, far calmer than any 9-year-old should ever have to be. "Ms. Clark, it's true. My dad works at the Johnson Space Center." "Enough," Clark snapped. "Astronauts don't live in neighborhoods like yours." The room fell silent. Heavier than gravity. Sharper than humiliation. Ava didn't cry. She simply breathed, slowly, the way she'd seen her parents do when the world tried to underestimate them. Then, the spark. "Miss Clark," she said softly, "my father is coming at 2 o'clock to talk about space exploration. You can call the office if you want." Clark laughed, the cold, brittle kind that breaks before it bends. "Ava, stop digging this ridiculous hole." What she didn't know, what she couldn't imagine, was that at that very moment, Dr. Michael Thompson was preparing real NASA equipment for his daughter's class. Helmet. Oxygen module. EVA components. Everything. Ava returned to her desk, clutching her torn project. Her classmates watched her differently now, not with doubt, but with curiosity. Her phone buzzed under the table. A message from Dad. "Princess, finishing things here. I'm bringing surprises for your class. Love you." Ava smiled, not out of defiance, but because she knew something her teacher didn't. Truth has perfect timing. And at 2 p.m., it would walk straight into room 204 wearing a NASA jumpsuit. Recess brought no mercy. Ava sat alone, gently piecing together the torn fragments of her project while the echoes of the morning still lingered in the back of her mind. She moved slowly, with the kind of quiet strength that didn't need witnesses to exist. Before the next moment unfolded, there was a brief breath in the story, a soft pause between the storm and what was coming. And before we continue, if you haven't done so yet, stay with us. These stories carry weight, and more moments like this one are on the way. Now, let's go back to Ava. While she worked silently, Ms. Clark was across the building spreading her own version of the events. In the teacher's lounge, her voice floated through the room as she stirred her coffee. "That little black girl is claiming her father is a NASA astronaut. Obviously she's just looking for attention." Ms. Martinez frowned. "Jennifer, are you sure? Maybe you should check." "Carmen, please," Clark cut in, dripping confidence she hadn't earned. "I've been teaching for 15 years. Astronauts do not live in Riverside Gardens." What she didn't know was that Riverside Gardens had been chosen intentionally, a quiet, multicultural neighborhood where the Thompsons could live without cameras, attention, or assumptions. Back in the classroom, Ava's resilience held firm. Tyler, the quiet blond boy from the front row, approached her timidly. "Ava. I believe you," he murmured. "My dad works for the government too. He says the most important people are usually the ones nobody notices." Ava gave him a small smile, soft, but sincere. "Thank you. That means a lot." But the moment Miss Clark walked back in, the warmth vanished. "Ava Thompson. Come to the front." Ava stood straight, the way she had seen her parents do when faced with people who doubted them. "Class," Clark said, "let's practice critical thinking. Ava, where does your father work?" "At the Johnson Space Center in Houston. He specializes in life support systems for space missions." Some children whispered in awe. Clark smirked. "Do you have pictures? A spacesuit at home? Anything real?" Ava hesitated. "For security reasons, he." "Oh, of course," Clark snapped. "Security reasons. How convenient." At that exact moment, Ava's phone buzzed again, a message from her mother. "Princess, Dad is preparing real EVA equipment. Today will be unforgettable." Ava slipped the phone away, but Clark noticed. Cell phone? In class? It was my mom, ma'am. Let me guess, Clark sneered. She also has an important job. Ava's voice remained calm. She's a biochemistry researcher. She develops medicine for astronauts. The room froze. Too precise. Too technical. Too impossible to be a lie. And yet, Miss Clark doubled down again. Astronaut father. Scientist mother. Ava, you need to understand the difference between imagination and reality. That was the moment something shifted behind Ava's eyes, focus, determination, the steady calm of someone raised to trust facts, not fear. Miss Clark, Ava said quietly, when my father arrives at 2 p.m., would you like to apologize in front of the class, or wait until he explains life support systems to the entire school? The room fell silent. Principal's office. Now. Ava picked up her backpack calmly. Before walking out, she turned to Tyler. Can you write on the board that at 2 o'clock we're learning how astronauts breathe in space? My dad is bringing real equipment. She left the room without a single tear. And with every step she took down that hallway, the story shifted closer to the truth. The hallway outside the principal's office felt strangely calm, almost too calm for a 9-year-old who had just been humiliated in front of an entire class. Ava sat quietly in the hard plastic chair while Mrs. Rodriguez, the school secretary, watched her with the soft, knowing eyes of someone who had seen far too many unfair situations. Honey, would you like me to call your parents? She asked gently. Ava shook her head. No need, ma'am. My dad is coming at 2 anyway. Mrs. Rodriguez paused at that answer. Something about the girl's tone, her steadiness, the utter lack of fear, didn't match the behavior of a child caught lying. What is he coming for, sweetheart? For the astronaut presentation, Ava said simply. The one Miss Clark said was a lie. The secretary's typing slowed, then stopped. She turned to her computer and hesitated, then opened the Thompson family file. Father, Michael Thompson. Occupation, government employee, NASA. Mother, Lisa Thompson. Occupation, researcher, Houston Medical Institute. Her breath caught. Oh my God, she whispered, picking up the phone with trembling fingers. Across the city, at the Johnson Space Center, Dr. Michael Thompson finished packing an actual EMU helmet, the kind astronauts use during spacewalks. He arranged compact oxygen tanks and a communication system he had used during his last mission. His colleague, Dr. Rodriguez, no relation to the school secretary, stared at the equipment in disbelief. Mike, you're taking real mission gear to an elementary school? Dr. Thompson sealed the transport case, every movement precise. My daughter was called a liar today, he said calmly. For telling the truth. Rodriguez shook his head. You and I have worked together on 7 missions, and I've never once seen you back down. It's not about intimidation, Thompson replied. It's about education. Some kids in that classroom have never seen a black scientist, a black astronaut, a black leader. Today they'll see all 3. He lifted the case as if carrying something sacred. Facts speak louder than prejudice, Rod. Always. Back at school, Principal Patterson arrived after the secretary's urgent call. Explain it to me again, she requested. Mrs. Rodriguez recounted everything, Clark tearing the project, calling Ava a liar, humiliating her publicly. And yes, she added, her father really works at NASA. I checked. The principal's face paled. Where is Clark now? In her classroom, teaching like nothing happened. And the child? Mrs. Rodriguez pointed toward Ava, who sat reading a book with the composure of someone twice her age. Patricia, the secretary whispered, that girl isn't scared. She isn't crying. It's like she knows justice is coming. Principal Patterson called Ava into the office. The girl closed her book, stood up, and walked inside with steady, deliberate steps. Yes, ma'am? The principal listened as Ava recounted everything, every insult, every accusation, every dismissal, without raising her voice, without exaggerating. Then Patterson asked, Ava, is your father really an astronaut? Yes, ma'am. Dr. Michael Thompson. I can show you pictures. Ava pulled up photos of her father in training, inside simulators, in suits, and labs. Not staged photos, real ones, snapshots of a father talking to his daughter while working in places ordinary people only read about. The principal felt her hands tremble. And does he know what happened today? No, ma'am. I didn't want him to worry. He'll find out when he arrives. That answer, that composure, that strategy, belonged to someone raised by scientists who solved problems with data, not panic. Ava, the principal asked softly, what do you think will happen when your father gets here? Ava finally smiled, the small, knowing smile of someone who understood the laws of physics and human arrogance. I think Miss Clark is about to learn something about gravity, ma'am. Gravity? Yes. My dad always says, whatever goes up without preparation eventually comes down. Principal Patterson swallowed hard. This was not a typical third grader. It was the daughter of two people who launched missions beyond Earth and handled crises in silence. And justice, real, scientific justice, was already on its way. A knock on the principal's door broke the charged silence. Patricia, the secretary said, poking her head inside, there's a man here from NASA. He says he's preparing equipment for a 2 o'clock presentation. The principal looked at Ava. The girl simply nodded, as if this was expected. Your father sent someone ahead? Patterson asked. Yes, ma'am. Dad doesn't leave anything to chance. He says every mission needs preparation and backup. The principal finally understood. Dr. Michael Thompson wasn't just coming to confront a teacher. He was approaching the situation like a full mission. With logistics. With precision. With strategy. Ava, aren't you even a little nervous? She asked gently. Ava thought for a moment. Ma'am, my mother designs medicine that keeps astronauts alive in space. My father makes decisions that prevent accidents in environments where mistakes can kill people instantly. They taught me that when the facts are on your side, nervousness is just wasted energy. A shiver ran down the principal's spine. And you are sure you have the facts? Yes, ma'am. In about 1 hour and 10 minutes, my father will walk into this school with equipment worth more than Miss Clark's house. He'll be wearing security credentials that allow him access to classified federal material. And he'll teach the whole class why judging someone by appearance is impossible when you rely on evidence. The principal stared, speechless. Ava zipped her backpack calmly and added, after that, Miss Clark will need to decide, apologize now, or explain to the school board why she humiliated the daughter of a federal scientist. Ava, do you realize this could ruin your teacher's career? Ava held the principal's gaze with a quiet, mature clarity. Ma'am, my father says the consequences of our actions follow the laws of physics. Not our wishes. Miss Clark chose her actions. Physics will take care of the rest. The principal had no words. She watched the child walk back to her seat, composed, calm, strategic, while outside in the hallway, the NASA representative waited to begin setting up. Time moved quickly. At exactly 2 p.m., 3 official NASA vehicles pulled up to Lincoln Elementary like a miniature presidential convoy. Mrs. Rodriguez, watching from the office window, pressed a hand to her chest. Oh my God, they sent a whole team. 2 men in dark suits stepped out first, unloading cases of equipment that looked like props from a science fiction movie, except these were real. Real oxygen tanks. Real communication systems. Real mission gear. Then the figure everyone noticed stepped out of the second vehicle. Dr. Michael Thompson. Tall. Focused. Calm. Wearing an authentic NASA jumpsuit with mission patches that told stories money could not buy. Artemis. ISS. International Mission Training. Inside classroom 204, Miss Clark tried to steady her hands as she wrote fractions on the board. Class, let's continue. The door opened. Principal Patterson stepped in first. Then the NASA personnel carrying equipment. And finally, filling the doorway completely, Dr. Thompson. The room fell silent in an instant. 28 children froze, stunned. None of them had ever seen a real astronaut before, much less one wearing gear that shimmered in the afternoon light. Dr. Thompson scanned the room once, then focused on the teacher. Miss Clark, he said, his voice calm but carrying the weight of someone who makes decisions in zero gravity, I believe you had questions about my daughter's credentials. Miss Clark's world collapsed. Her knees weakened. Her breath hitched. Her face drained of color. She tried to speak, but only fragments came out. I didn't. I thought. But the truth stood in front of her, wearing NASA patches she could not deny. The silence in the classroom felt almost unreal, as if time itself had paused. Dr. Thompson stepped further inside, placing the gleaming space helmet on a nearby table. The polished visor reflected the faces of 28 astonished children. He turned toward them first, not toward the trembling teacher. "Good afternoon," he said with a warm smile. "My name is Dr. Michael Thompson. I've been a NASA astronaut for 16 years, and I've just returned from 3 weeks of training for my next mission to the International Space Station. I understand my daughter Ava was asked to defend this information today." The class erupted in hushed excitement. Tyler raised his hand, voice shaking. "Sir, have you really been to space?" Dr. Thompson nodded gently. "3 times, young man. And today, I brought some of the equipment I used there." Gasps filled the room. Even the students who had doubted Ava now stared at her with newfound admiration. 2 NASA staff members began unpacking the cases, laying out real space gloves, oxygen tanks, communication modules, and the unmistakable hardware of actual extravehicular activity gear. The classroom transformed before their eyes, turning into a mini NASA lab. Meanwhile, Ms. Clark shrank behind her desk, wishing she could disappear. Her authority evaporated, leaving only the sharp sting of regret and fear. Dr. Thompson finally turned to her. "Ms. Clark," he said with a calm firmness that cut deeper than anger, "I believe you have something to say to my daughter." Clark's lips trembled. I made a terrible mistake." "Yes," he replied quietly, "you did." His voice never rose, but each word felt precise, deliberate, like the clicks of a spacecraft's control panel. "You assumed a black child was lying because her truth didn't fit your expectations. You judged her family, her background, her dignity, without evidence." A whisper of shame swept through the room. The students watched their teacher, not the way students usually look at authority, but the way witnesses observe someone being held accountable. "You taught these children," Dr. Thompson continued, "that authority gives permission to humiliate those you believe are beneath you. That lesson is dangerous. It follows them for years." Clark's knees buckled. She caught herself on the desk, tears streaming, not of remorse, but of a career slipping through her fingers. "Dr. Thompson. I didn't know. I never imagined." "Exactly," he said. "You never imagined that a child from a modest home, a black child, could come from a family of scientists." He rested a hand on Ava's shoulder, a gesture filled with tenderness and pride. "My daughter has shown more composure and integrity today than many adults I've worked with." A hush settled over the classroom once more. Then he knelt beside Ava's desk, speaking softly but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Sweetheart, I'm proud of you. You stayed calm. You stayed respectful. You trusted the truth." The room held its breath at the weight of the moment. And then Dr. Thompson stood again, facing the class with warmth. "Now, who wants to see how astronauts breathe in space?" Excitement exploded across the classroom. Every child leaned forward as Dr. Thompson and the NASA team powered up the equipment. The soft hum of oxygen systems filled the room, accompanied by the clicks and beeps of real mission hardware. "This," Dr. Thompson explained, lifting a compact module, "is part of the portable life support system. Without it, we can't survive outside the spacecraft." Wide eyes. Open mouths. The unmistakable sound of young minds expanding. He invited the class closer. "Come on. Don't be shy. This is real gear. It has been used in training for actual spacewalks." The students gathered around like they were standing at the edge of the universe. Even children who had laughed at Ava earlier now stared at her with awe, realizing she lived with someone who wore this equipment, someone who had touched the stars. Meanwhile, Miss Clark remained in the corner, irrelevant and shrinking by the second. With every demonstration, with every technical explanation, with every patch on Dr. Thompson's suit, her own authority crumbled. Tyler raised his hand again. "Sir, can I try on the helmet?" Dr. Thompson smiled. "Of course. But first, there's something important all of you need to understand." The room quieted instantly. It does not matter where you come from, what color your skin is, or how much money your family has. If you want to reach the stars, the only things that matter are curiosity, discipline, and hard work. Nothing else. The children absorbed every word. He glanced toward Miss Clark, not cruelly, but firmly, letting the lesson land where it needed to. "And never, ever, let anyone convince you that your dreams are impossible." The message struck deeper than any punishment could. Finally, he placed the large helmet gently over Tyler's head. The boy giggled as the visor lowered, his voice muffled but joyful. "This is amazing." A cascade of laughter and cheers followed. One by one, the students lined up to touch the equipment, test the gear, ask questions. For 2 full hours, Dr. Thompson turned that third-grade classroom into a portal to the cosmos. Charts. Gear demonstrations. Stories of zero gravity. Videos from training sessions. The children were transported, not by fantasy, but by reality. And throughout it all, Miss Clark remained off to the side, the color drained from her face, her career collapsing in quiet slow motion. She wasn't the center of the room anymore. Knowledge was. Wonder was. Truth was. Ava Thompson was. The girl who had been called a liar that morning was now the bridge connecting an entire classroom to the universe. A child whose truth had more gravitational pull than the prejudice that tried to silence her. And everyone in that room, students, principal, even the teacher herself, knew one thing without a doubt. Nothing would ever be the same again. As the classroom buzzed with excitement, the contrast in the room grew painfully clear. On one side, children with shining eyes, touching real NASA gear, listening to stories of zero gravity, laughing, learning, expanding. On the other side, Miss Clark, silent, pale, shrinking into the corner as if trying to fold into herself, watching her authority dissolve piece by piece. Dr. Thompson guided the students through each device with patient enthusiasm. "This is the communication system we use during spacewalks," he explained, lifting a compact module. "It keeps us connected to Earth and to one another." The children leaned in closer. "And this," he added, pointing to another device, "helps regulate oxygen levels when we're outside the spacecraft. Without it, well, let's just say we wouldn't survive very long." Gasps burst from the class. Some whispered, "Whoa," others mouthed, "No way." But one child wasn't smiling, and it wasn't Ava. It was Miss Clark. She watched her students, the same students she had tried to protect from lies, glowing with inspiration. And the weight of what she had done that morning pressed on her like an anchor sinking into deep water. Every demonstration was a reminder. She hadn't just attacked Ava. She had attacked possibility itself. The moment that truly crushed her came when Dr. Thompson turned to the class and said, "You know, the most important thing about being an astronaut isn't bravery or intelligence. It's respect. We rely on each other up there. We trust each other with our lives. There's no room for prejudice in a place where teamwork keeps you alive." Those words didn't shout. They didn't accuse. They simply existed, undeniable, unshakable. And they struck Miss Clark harder than any reprimand could. The children nodded, absorbing the lesson. Dr. Thompson continued the presentation, showing a video of astronauts floating during EVA training. Laughter filled the room again as the kids watched grown adults drift like clumsy balloons inside massive training pools. Ava stood near her father, smiling with quiet pride as she watched her classmates react. For the first time, they weren't looking at her with confusion or doubt. They were looking at her with admiration. And that shift, that transformation, was the true gravity Dr. Thompson had promised. By the time the final demonstration ended, the room felt different. Brighter. Bigger. Full of possibility. And Miss Clark realized something that made her chest tighten. She had tried to crush a child who lived with this brilliance every single day. A child who had grown up around spacesuits, training stories, scientific discussions at dinner, and she had called that child a liar. The humiliation was complete. But the consequences were just beginning. The next moments unfolded with the precision of a launch sequence, slow, controlled, unavoidable. Dr. Thompson closed the final equipment case and turned once more to Miss Clark. His voice remained calm, but there was no mistaking the steel beneath it. "Miss Clark, before I leave, there's something you need to hear." The room quieted instantly. "You didn't just accuse my daughter of lying. You humiliated her in front of her peers. You dismissed her truth because it didn't match your personal expectations of what a family like ours should look like." Clark swallowed hard, eyes wet but unfocused. She tried to speak, but he continued, steady as orbital motion. "There were 28 children watching you this morning. 28 young minds learning from your behavior. And what did you teach them?" He paused, letting the silence stretch. "That authority is an excuse for cruelty. that certain children should not be believed, that worthiness is determined by appearance. A murmur rippled through the students. Clark trembled, hands clasped tightly in front of her, voice barely a whisper. I didn't mean. I never thought. Dr. Thompson lifted a hand gently, not to comfort, but to hold the truth steady. You never thought a girl like my daughter could come from a family of scientists. You never thought that brilliance and ambition could live in a modest neighborhood. You never thought to question your own bias. The words landed like soft but powerful impacts, controlled, precise, impossible to escape. Then his tone softened, but the message intensified. Children deserve better. They deserve adults who lift them up, not pull them down. They deserve teachers who encourage their dreams, not tear them apart. He stepped aside slightly, allowing Ava to stand beside him. The girl didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She simply stood tall, steady, grounded, dignified. Today, Dr. Thompson continued, my daughter showed more grace than you did. She stayed respectful. She stayed honest. She stayed calm. Qualities we value deeply at NASA, because out there, respect and truth are the only things that keep you alive. Miss Clark finally broke into a quiet sob. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just the soft, sinking realization of someone who had crossed a line she could never uncross. The children watched in total silence. Not out of fear, but because they were witnessing something rare. An adult being held accountable the way adults often expect children to be. Ava stepped forward, her voice gentle, not vengeful. Ms. Clark, I never wanted to make you feel bad. I just wanted to tell the truth. Clark covered her mouth with trembling fingers. The sincerity in Ava's voice, the simplicity of it, hurt more than any formal reprimand could. Dr. Thompson nodded proudly at his daughter. Then he turned back to the class with a warm smile. All right, he said softly, let's end today with one last message. Every head lifted. Every eye focused. If someone tells you who they are, believe them. If someone shares their dreams, protect them. And if someone underestimates you, let your truth do the talking. He looked down at Ava again, his voice lowering just a bit. And sometimes, the truth is bright enough to outshine everything. The class erupted into applause, spontaneous, genuine, loud. And Miss Clark. She stayed quiet. Broken. And forever changed. The applause slowly faded, but the impact of the moment lingered in the air like the final echo of a rocket launch. For the next hour, the classroom stayed alive with energy, children trying on gloves, touching communication modules, whispering to each other with a kind of reverence they had never felt within these four walls. Dr. Thompson stayed patient and warm through it all, answering each question with the same care he gave during mission briefings. But there was one person who didn't move. One person who stayed frozen in place. Miss Clark. She watched her students form a line to interact with Ava's father, watched them look at science with awe instead of confusion, watched them treat Ava not as an outsider, but as a leader. And for the first time in years, she realized something painful. She had taught the wrong lesson for far too long. When the final demonstration ended, Dr. Thompson began packing his equipment with the steady rhythm of someone who has done this 1,000 times. His NASA team helped secure each piece carefully, like handling artifacts of another world. The children gathered around him one last time. Will you come back? Tyler asked hopefully. Dr. Thompson smiled. I'd be happy to. Space isn't going anywhere. A wave of laughter filled the room. Then, as the team finished loading the last case, Principal Patterson stepped inside. Dr. Thompson, she said sincerely, thank you. You didn't just bring equipment today. You brought perspective. He nodded humbly. I appreciate that, ma'am. The goal wasn't to embarrass anyone, only to teach. His eyes briefly flicked toward Miss Clark, then back to the principal. And to ensure that our children, all of them, are treated with dignity. Miss Clark stood stiffly, hands clasped, unable to meet anyone's gaze. Principal Patterson approached her with a controlled, formal tone. Jennifer, my office. Now. The teacher nodded, defeated. Before leaving, she looked at Ava, really looked at her, for the first time. I'm sorry, she whispered. I was wrong. Ava offered a small, sincere nod. Not out of pity, but out of strength. She didn't need revenge. She had already won. Dr. Thompson placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder as Miss Clark followed the principal out of the room. Ava leaned slightly into him, comforted, safe, proud. And as the NASA team exited to their vehicles, the children pressed against the windows, waving wildly at the astronaut who had just changed their view of the universe. Ava waved back, her heart full. She had stood up for the truth, and the truth had shown up wearing a NASA jumpsuit. 6 months passed. And the ripple effect of that day spread farther than anyone at Lincoln Elementary could have imagined. Miss Clark packed her belongings in silence, placing framed photos and dusty binders into a cardboard box. The dismissal was final. The investigation revealed more than one incident of prejudice, patterns she could no longer hide. Her teaching career was over. And the irony? She had been undone not by an angry parent, not by a complaint, but by the truth of a 9-year-old girl she refused to believe. Across the hallway, Ava walked with newfound confidence, now a 4th grader and the proud leader of the school's astronomy club. Dozens of students signed up, eager to learn about telescopes, galaxies, astronauts, and the science behind the stars. Every month, Dr. Thompson visited the club, bringing new stories, new photos, even new experiments. To the students, he wasn't just an astronaut. He was proof that dreams could be real. Mrs. Patterson, moved by what had happened, implemented strict anti-discrimination protocols. The school became a national example of inclusion, featured in educational conferences and training seminars. Even universities took notice. Clark's story, the humiliation, the downfall, became a case study in how prejudice destroys trust, limits potential, and breaks futures. But the most powerful change of all? It lived inside the children who witnessed that day. They no longer doubted themselves, or each other, or the possibility that greatness could come from anyone, any family, any background, any neighborhood. Tyler remained one of Ava's closest friends. He often told her, "Your dad didn't just show us space. He showed us how to treat people." Ava always smiled at that, a gentle, wise smile that carried more strength than her classmates fully understood. Because Ava had learned something too. She learned that truth has gravitational force. The more someone tries to push it down, the stronger it pulls back up. She learned that some people underestimate others because they cannot imagine greatness existing outside their own narrow view. And she learned that sometimes, life gives you a moment, a single moment, where everything you are, everything you know, everything you believe, stands tall in front of those who doubted you. Ava had lived that moment. And she had come out shining. In the end, she didn't need to win through anger. She won through truth. And her truth, her family, her dignity, her story, reached farther than any prejudice ever could. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't to destroy those who underestimated you. It's to rise so high that they can't reach you anymore.